No. Okay, so Jading Loon. With that being said, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to open the debate. Here. Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry. Forgot no one's standing. Okay.
When François Hollande stood for the French presidential election in 2012, he promised sweeping left-wing reforms. He promised to increase taxes on the richest people in France up to 70%. He promised massive renationalization of many state industries. But when he got into power, he walked back on his stance. His policies were characterized by massive privatization of firms in France. And this left a lot of people who voted him. People from the socialist factions within France in a quagmire because they voted for a person that did not fulfill the promise that he promised. We would want a world where a person would declare what kind of stance that politician is standing for, whether it be a fiscal policy or monetary policy, whatever social policy they do. And we are going to prove to you why our side creates better politics and why we make people take elections more seriously. So this is our stance. It does not matter who exactly wins into which politician wins the election in this way. So thank you. Because that's really not in our hands. What we want people is that the person that they vote for is a person that truly represents their idea, is a person that will not walk back on what they voted for. So here's our model. Firstly, we will make political campaigners declare their stances to the public, whether they are more inclined to the left wing or the right wing, what kind of nitty-gritty of the policies of all those kind of things, economically and socially, will make them do that. Secondly, we will declare their stances in public. We will inform people about that. We'll make news websites about what that political party is. Thirdly, if that politician decides to form a coalition, they must declare to the voters that they intend to form a coalition with another party. So the example over here is Angela Merkel's CDU party forming a grand coalition with the Social Democrats in Germany in the last election. No, thank you. But fourthly, if they do backtrack in the middle of the campaign and backtrack on their stance, we will publish that news anyway. No, thank you. So three things in this debate. Firstly, the accountability between politicians and voters, why that's important. Secondly, why our policy on comparison creates a cleaner political campaign. And thirdly, why our side makes people take elections more seriously. No, thank you. So let's talk about the accountability. There needs to exist a proper reciprocity between what the politicians promise and what voters vote for. Often voters vote for someone who supports their viewpoints. But here is the problem in status quo. Politicians who make promises can often walk back on what on their stances they promise in their political campaign when they are seen as too hard. For example, the example I gave you in the intro of François Hollande walking back on his socialist policies that plan to renationalize French firms. And you know what happens? Those creates a massive distrust between people in the socialist faction. And like what I told you in my intro, right? Basically, people voted in a person that did not truly represent their ideas. So on our side, we want elected people to be more accountable to our voters. So firstly, we will prevent politicians from making extravagant promises, because we need to recognize the psyche of the politician at that point in time. It's always trying to win the election, and they'll often make the most extravagant promises in order to win votes. This is exactly what happened with Lula da Silva in Brazil, promising sweeping reforms and redistribution of wealth towards people in the favelas, but completely failing in the process of doing so without recognizing his limitations in the first place. But secondly, we also want to pressure politicians to consider their stances, what their expected policies are, and do more cost-benefit analysis of what those policies are before releasing it. Because at the point in time, we don't want politicians to release something that would bring votes at that moment in time of political campaigning. We want to do that. We want them to measure exactly what they want to do and basically promises that they will keep for the accountability of the politician and the voters outside preserves that. Before I move on, yeah, sure.
So the motion says prior to their campaign period to impose a deadline. I would expect you to also be in principle imposing a deadline for them to complete all their promises when they're in office as well. Would you agree to that?
Yes. Moving on. Second argument, why this leads to cleaner pay. But this thing, right, regardless of whether they fail or not, it does not matter on our side because policies do fail. What we want on our side is an attempt from the politicians to do that, right? So it's not like what Franshaw Hollande did. Even if his policies fail, we want that politician to continue with that policy as opposed to just abandoning it and completely, in principle, evading whatever promises they make. Okay, that's clear. Secondly, why it leads to cleaner political campaigns? And this is the thrust of this argument. We argue that political campaigns should not only be about propping up your ideas and see how that ideas and see who joins you based on their ideas, not attempting to use your rhetoric to fish people out of another party. No, thank you. We argue that this is problematic in today's campaigning nature because campaigns are often characterized by how many people a politician can fish from an opposing party. We give you the example of Bill Clinton in the 1992 presidential election, where he appealed to the left by saying he supports women's rights and their ability to progress in society. But then to the right, he appealed to the right by saying he supports conservative family values, which is directly contradictory towards what he said to the left. And the problem is, all politicians are doing this. Both sides are doing quite similar things, and this turned politics into a dirty game of smearing each other, and it basically blurs the line on what stance you are really on. And it's also problematic because nobody can explicitly point out your hypocrisy because you don't declare that stance in the first place, right? Now we can, because we are like what we are doing is like we draw parallels to how we are forcing people to write an affidavit. You must abide by whatever that person does. And we would argue that outside creates even better news reporting. Because firstly, it's easier to point out whenever any person switch their stances in an unnatural manner. Secondly, it's harder to smear politicians. Because at least right now, there's a clear dichotomy and binary on what exactly you are supporting on. Therefore, people cannot just pick one small matter and say, aha, this person is supporting something else. Because there's a clear binary over there. So yes, cleaner politics outside can ensure this. But lastly, it's about taking the elections more seriously. There's a reason why people always perceive politicians as snakes and untrustworthy people. Because every time they look at a politician, they would see a person that will walk back on their promises when things get too hard and basically just do whatever to win vote. This is why people rather opt out in the USA election and the Brexit referendum. When it's clear that when the politicians have something clear on what they want to decide, people are more likely to vote because people recognize that these politicians need to abide by the promises they made and they cannot walk back on it because if they walk back on it, it's literally political suicide. So on our side, we are more likely to create a more inclusive democracy where people are more likely to vote because politicians cannot be snakes and flip-flops anymore. Very proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister for the speech. I would like to now invite the Leader of Opposition to kickstart the opposition's case. Here.
Unfortunately for side government, there were no standards to which they adjudicated whether a politician was good or bad. A mere flip-flopping of stances and policies prior to a campaign period does not automatically qualify for an individual to be horrible. Rather, I think it's more likely that it's reflective of the changing nature of politics that a politician must represent. In this side of opposition, I'll do two things. First, I put there is a necessity, and actually it's more likely that politicians change as a result of absolute necessity that you will have. And second, is how to pinning them to their campaign stances prior campaign period, and according to them, all throughout their presidency, everything is absolutely horrible. But before that, 2 point responses. First to their model. According to them, and in response to a POI, they said, so long as you attempt to do it, we will qualify you as your policies. What kind of substance is that? Politicians will pretend like they're attempting to do their show documentation as if they tried, but the bill didn't pass. All these things means that your attempt as a metric to bypass your standards means that a lot of politicians will get away. You don't actually solve the problem you speak about. But the second thing I'll say, if an attempt is the only thing that is required of them, often they forge documentation coalition, they hide, they pretend like they're in coalition, they break it off later. An attempt can be falsified, an attempt can ensure that individuals don't actually fulfill your policies. Absolute crap. The second thing I'll say is, what is the punitive measure in this debate? What happens when a politician refuses to go through a deadline? Like Trump, Theresa May, Nigel Farage, don't give a shit about your democratic system. Will you pull funding? Will you disallow the election? I don't know what you are going to do to them. I don't even know how you're going to keep people in check. But the second thing they say, with regards to this, is their premise for doing this is people need to stick with their stances in order to truly represent the communities that they come from, because otherwise we have extravagant policies that are unreliable. This debate is about what is realistic. I am going to assure you that it's very policies that are doomed to fail. The reason for this is threefold. One, if you're going to promise very extravagantly, your opposition party is more likely to call you and you're seen as unreliable. So when Trump promised a great wall, he mentioned backtrack on it because it was just economically unfeasible. So we think that's an actual check for why it's not extravagant. But the second, oftentimes it's true that when you have an extravagant policy, you're more likely to be able, you're more, as a result of promising extravagantly, you're seen as a less viable candidate, and therefore people are not likely to support you. But third thing, if it's true that people are extravagant, I say it's a trade-off. We'll trade off some extravagant policies because you know what? The fact that Obama promised to recalibrate the American system, put more faith in African Americans, Bernie Sanders, even though we didn't win, the faith that individuals had when they were likely to vote, get involved in politics, more likely to donate contribution, to show up at rallies, and when people show up, we think they're better able to moderate those candidates. It's a natural check and balance. But the second thing they say is easier to call out this hypocrisy because, like in principle, academics also do this. What the hell? Do you even know what an affidavit is? Affidavit takes into account your past, account of your future. You can assure and sign into a contract into the future because you're unsure of your circumstances. If affidavits are like that, we frustrate contracts all the time when circumstances change. I don't know what the difference is. But second, if there's a hypocrisy and you're literally flip-flopping back and front, in our world we can moderate them. Because literally in our world you can claim it's two positions. Why don't you pick one, or why don't you moderate and pick either one? In your world, if Donald Trump started off as a defensive person, he cannot change in your world. Can you imagine the Donald Trump you will create if he was grab your pussy from the beginning? He will grab the pussy to the very end. You make individuals more defensive, less likely to change, and less likely to be cooperative. Have a seat. First, why do you think there's a necessity for people to change their policy stances during a campaign? Like, I want to start off this debate by suggesting that it's not very easy for a politician to change the position they started off with. Because oftentimes it costs you some political clout, it makes you seem as more of a person who's rocky. As a result of this, politicians often don't do it unless absolutely necessary or it benefits their political career. So what are the four instances in which we think politicians do this? The first, oftentimes there's a change in the needs of their constituencies. Before an election and during a campaign period, often the needs of a community change. So for example, Theresa May, she previously told her constituency she wasn't going to have an election until 2020. But after Brexit happened and her constituency told her that she needed a greater working majority in order to negotiate with the EU, she changed her head, going to have an election on the 8th of June. This means that a lot of individuals have needs and nuances that are changing as a result of the campaign, the way oppositions react, what the circumstances are that change the US election, for example, the Russian hack. I think in your world, less and less individuals get their need represented because they're beholden to a time before this. But the second thing I will say is a lot of people, when they enter the campaign, then as a result of it, they are privy to the need for coalition. A lot of people don't know that they need coalitions before an election because they don't know what the exit polls look like, they don't know which not to have coalitions until the campaign period actually arises. In your world, people won't make coalitions because they're unaware of this. As a result, you lose out on very viable, important coalitions, such as, for example, the Liberal LDP coalition in the Philippines that only came up after the campaign trail. If in your world they didn't had a coalition during the campaign period, they literally lose out a majority in their Senate. But the third thing, oftentimes in your world, because politicians have to keep their promises till the end of their campaign, they will make very vague, very low risk, and very low maintenance promises. This is harmful for two reasons. First, I think on the comparative, you have less and less politicians actually going into positions or stances that require. A lot of politicians have capital and funding to do a lot of things in this world. But in your world, you make them fed and funding on very medium and small things. And not in your world, if they don't believe in those promises, they have to be defensive till the end. But therefore, oftentimes, campaigning is a discovery process. You find out which opposition parties are doing well. As a result, different needs need to require different types of position. But the second part of this debate is the House. In your world, you will have more partisanship, you will have more individuals who are less cooperative. Why? Not in the US and most countries, the safest policy that you can actually accommodate for in the future are ones that are partisan, that will get public support from your Democrats or your Republicans. The things in the middle, the things like for example, independent politicians or moderate politicians want to propose, don't have the bipartisan support. So in your world, a lot of people who are independent politicians, who are moderating, who want to ensure that some voices are represented, get drowned out in your, because now they're forced to make partisan policies because they have to fulfill those policies, or they won't even run an election to begin with. But the second thing I would suggest is that you have more voter equity in your world, because a lot of people come for elections just by the promise that they know that the candidate believes in what they say. Bernie Sanders, Obama, literally Bernie or Bus don't give a shit about outcomes. In your world, when politicians are seen to be defending things that they might or might not believe in, the people are not sure that politicians represent their actual interests and not represent their will. So in your world, a lot of people voted up for elections as a result of this. But the worst case, I think we have to defend this, is politicians become more defensive. In your world, if a politician wants to change his mind and wants to become more moderate, in your world, they can't. They have to stick to the original stance. And the only thing worse than a flip-flopping Donald Trump is a Trump that stood by a Great Wall in America and cannot leave it, and in your all funding will go to that, and hell on America would have broken loose.
Right, thank you very much, LO. Can you please have the DPM?
Mr. Speaker, let us understand the debates aren't one lot of extremities, and we can see. Let us be more reasonable in this debate. Whereas the side opposition would like to bank on like very good politicians who only make promises, and it's very unfortunate the sort of backtracking they have to do, and they only do it when they absolutely need to, is not reasonable. But secondly, we also agree that what wasn't missing in PM's speech will come out in mind. One of the two questions that Amri regarded, right? Number one, she said these are soft answers. The rebuttal for this is very simple, right? The leader of a political party does not have absolute power. Sometimes you have Supreme Court decisions that can overrule your executive power. Sometimes you have parliamentary decisions that vote against a particular policy, right? Or sometimes you have a vote like Brexit. And sometimes if like you as the UK Prime Minister promised UK never to leave the EU, but subsequently down the line you have an election and they have a Brexit, that is completely out of your control and an unfair place that burden onto you, right? It's not a soft stance, it's not a reasonable thing that happens in this sport. Secondly, what about the punitive measures? We're happy to throw them in jail, we're happy to take them out of the political campaign. If subsequently, after you join politics, after you win, and you still don't deliver on your promises. So I think, right, there is a reasonable way you can go to court and see if the politician made reasonable attempts to make his policy pass through, right? I mean, if the court recognizes that he did do his best, then it's unfair to charge him, right? But on a comparative, if he is faking it, he's saying, and does not have sufficient documentation, we're more than happy to have class action suits, impeachment, whatever have you, right? As many punitive measures we can afford to these politicians, we would have them. So those things are this way, right? What are the questions that I wish to answer in today's debate? Number one, I'm going to be talking about the psychology of voters and why on your side, you enable politicians to pick and choose and garner more support on unfortunate lines such as loyalty. Secondly, how the status quo privileges rich parties and on a comparative, how we make it a better level playing game. Thirdly, how politicians start fighting for more reasonable things because we think the response was inadequate and now we'll re-evaluate this clash. And lastly, how we remove media power play from political elections. First question, the psychology of the voters. This is premised the shift in stance is a political tool often to garner new votes, especially when there is high levels of competition, right? What does this debate mean and what does it mean, right? Voter base that is incredibly loyal to them. But subsequently, if they were to make switches in their stances and were to moderate, right, these voter bases will oftentimes stay on the lines of loyalty, right? There are three reasons why this oftentimes happens. Number one, first mover incentive, right? When Trump was the first to say, I will build a wall, right? A huge bunch of supporters who feel that resonated very strongly with them will oftentimes vote in Trump. But even subsequently, even if he falls back on that, if this kind of effect, or have better border control, right? The reasoning of these voters is he's the first to say it. He actually thinks about this more than the other candidate, right? When he probably never did, right? So the comparative is because of first mover's advantage. You garner a place in the mind of the voters and you make them feel that they are being prioritized when they're actually not, right? Secondly, you don't want to seem as a voter, right? Like, unfortunately, we're so loyal for stupid things like football clubs, right? Like Man U is doing shit now, but Max will still watch the matches, right? Can you imagine the level of loyalty you'll have for political parties and political campaigns? They oftentimes form your identity. You often have to defend them on a daily basis. They are so subthings in your mind that because you have invested so much of your mental capacity into believing in their policies, right? You're less likely to backtrack. And you know it'll be extremely shameful for you if you were a Trump supporter and down the line you become a Hillary supporter, right? So what this forces you to do is oftentimes defend Trump even when he makes his stances against your own wishes, right? And the important part to note here is the state has this information on the psychology of voters, right? The state is in a specific ability to ensure that this does not continue in subsequent elections due to the asymmetry of information. We would prefer a state that makes sure that these sort of dirty tactics does not take part in a political campaign or an election, instead of letting it continue and let there be a power play by these politicians. What is the conclusion of this argument? This makes it much easier for people to make informed choices and don't force people to vote in political parties or individual candidates on the virtue of loyalty, because you have a spreadsheet of what they are promising you, right? And you're more happy for that to occur. Second question, how the status quo privileges rich parties, right? There are two prongs to this. Richer parties oftentimes are able to campaign better and push the sort of changes that they fought for along the lines because they have better outreach. They can go into more underdeveloped areas. They have better campaigning tools and they have technocrats to advise them how to make them sound more fun, right? But what they are able to do is also make their policy shifts sound more interesting and more important in comparison to rich parties, in comparison to the poorer parties, right? So whenever a poorer party flip-flop, the power that richer parties have can call them out. But whenever a richer party flip-flop, they make it sound like a reasonable thing to do, just like Amrit will have you believe, and that's why people continue voting them in. At least on our side, when there is a concrete monolithic promises that you make, right? You make it much easier for these lesser privileged parties to have a manifesto in direct contention to that, instead of forcing them to shift also along the line, but never have the same amount of outreach. This is a comparison. But before I move on, yeah.
So you sound really non-contentious. Because it's true that richer politicians and richer parties have all these advantages. They will now, in your world, use that advantage to be more defensive, to justify the policy they started off in your world. So how is that any different from shifting in our world?
So like defending something will always gain an attack, right? The debate here is when you make shifts in stances, how are you better able to shift your stance is oftentimes in the hands of richer parties in comparison to poorer parties. But at least from the get-go, if you make a manifesto that is clear, you give parties more time to consider your manifesto and have sufficient rebuttal and opposition to the party. Third question, how we remove media power play, right? And we saw this heavily in the election, right? When we see presidential campaigns at one particular interview in one particular constituency supporting one thing, but in another interview backtracking on it. When you see Trump in conservative states saying, yes, we will build the wall, but later on saying, no, we'll just take better precautions, and these videos are regurgitated, what oftentimes happens in the minds of these people is that because media has complete monopoly on which part of the interviews you see, or which part of the snippets you see, or what part of the speech you see, oftentimes you aren't given the clearest picture possible. This degrades huge amount of political parties and politics in general. On a comparative, if you have your manifesto on a website and that is unquestionable and that is concrete, right? People are better off making decisions in the world where they're more informed that there are no switches, right? Because in your world, I'm still confused if Trump is going to build the wall or not throughout the entirety of his campaign. Because one interview says yes, the other interview says no. At least on a comparative, I know for sure if I vote for Trump, he'll do everything in his power to make sure the wall happens. But lastly, how politicians are going to start fighting for more reasonable things. We will trade off Amrit's cause. We will trade off politicians being more safe. We're happy if they're going to be more safe, but more reasonable and actually make attempts at meeting the manifesto goals on a comparative of promise.
Thank you very much, DPM. Can you please have the yellow? Here. Yeah, go ahead. Cool. All right, can you please have the yellow?
The true psychology of voters works like this. If you defend something and you continuously use the rhetoric that you are defending it, you go more and more hardline, people are more bought over by it because you are one consistent line. It's the same comparison to the ease of being able to call out one thing that contradicts from another. Premise A contradicts to premise B. That's actually easier for voters to see and determine and call out in comparison to one continuous task where Donald Trump will continuously defend one line and use all sorts of rhetoric that buys over their votes, use more and more inflammatory rhetoric. We would prefer if he's able to backtrack from it after he's been called out compared to continuously defending it on their side. I have two questions for them, but before that, let me point out some things that I really cannot let them get away with. So the first thing that the Prime Minister explained to us was that you just call out people who we will just call out people who overpromise. And then the DPM has this new model that they will impeach these people who overpromise. This means that, and this is exactly harmful to them, right? That the very thought and threat of the idea of being impeached means that people will be as safe as possible. People won't actually provide policies that could make a change. Because the truth is, there are a lot of controversial policies that that are very difficult to be fulfilled are ones that people actually need. So big changes require more controversial or more risky policies, but people will conflate that with possibly not being able to fulfill those policies, and therefore politicians won't actually do it. You'll end up with a really safe and vague policy because of they're afraid of the punishment that you say is true on your side. So we think that the second thing is that you can't let them get away with just attempting that policy. If they say that all you need to do is attempt that policy, that already happens in status quo. It happens a lot when people promise a campaign, they try to attempt to do a policy, they give a half-hearted attempt, and they therefore don't fulfill it. That's more likely on your side than on ours if you allow that leeway, right? This means that they'll still overpromise anyway, and just show vague attempts of doing that policy, possibly faking it, possibly just showing that attempt. We think that if you really wanted your benefits, you need to say that they must fulfill that policy in that term of their presidency. Otherwise, what kind of changes will you get? We don't think you'll get the benefits of actual good policies on your side. But the last thing that but before I move on to this idea, let me deal with the most recent idea about media, right? So they are saying that the media is very selective, and therefore that people are confused because they're only selective on one stance but don't show the other stance. We think that what happens on your side is that because media is incentivized to ensure the most popularity of their media and to get as much viewers as possible, instead they'll be more selective to hardline stances that are very aggressive. This means that centrist stances won't actually enter into the field of the media. Otherwise, the media will show this one hardline stance and only ever show that the media is more selective and harmful on your side. Even if voters don't get confused, they are more susceptible to inflammatory rhetorics in comparison to yours, right? But here's where I deal with the manipulation of voters. And they give you this in three rather non-contentious levels. So we accept that all these three reasons are reasons as to why there is a manipulation of voters, but they are worse on your side. So the first thing that they say is that there's a first mover's advantage. That a lot of politicians rush to one stance without thinking of it because they think it's a first mover's advantage. The problem is that this mindset of politicians still exists because they still want the first mover's advantage. But now, after rushing to it and getting to that stance, they will stick to it. They'll realize suddenly that, hey, this first mover's advantage wasn't a very good idea. This stance is starting to be less appealing to voters. But on our world, they can change it because it's, when they decide to, yours will rush to it and stick there, and you'll experience the harms of your first mover advantage a lot worse. But the next thing we say is that the idea of loyalty, right? We think that that loyalty right now is the check and balance to these people, but they also ensure that the loyalty is what ensures that the politicians are sensitive to the needs of these people. Insofar as Amrit explained to you, the constituencies regularly evolve. They regularly have different needs. So, for example, like in Brexit, where there was a different need as a result of the Brexit, right? We think that Politicians are better able to be sensitive to their constituencies, unlike your side, right? In your side, what will happen is that you have to stick to that stance. They'll end up losing followers because you no longer are sensitive to their needs and you don't have that loyalty on your side. The last thing we'll say is an idea of richer campaigns. This is really ridiculous, right? Because what they're saying is that richer campaigners have money and therefore they have more money to overpromise and they sound more interesting. Yeah, but on your side, richer campaigners will have more money to follow through with their promises, whereas poorer ones wouldn't have that money. We think that what happens is that the rich and poor divide would still exist, just that it will shift to different priorities, right? It will shift to rather defending really hardline stances and defending and like trying to fulfill these promises as quickly as possible. Whereas those who are poorer will always go to vague stances, never want big change because they know that they don't have the money to follow through with those promises. We want to move on to this idea of over-promising. Sure.
Speak the true or false. In a world in which you can promise heaven and earth, but probably never have to attempt because there's no legal recourse to get it. But in a world in which you have to promise mediocrely, but have to make substantial attempts to getting those changes, is that a better world?
Okay, no, don't buy into the rhetoric that comes from the government side. Look, on our side, we will overpromise many things, but we'll still be able to achieve some because we dare to dream of this change. Your idea is that nobody ever dared to dream of that change. Therefore, you will have really subpar policies, or ones that are really to benefit. Ours, you have some that fail, but people don't have experience repercussions, and therefore can continuously enter into different policies that help people and have some benefit on our side compared to yours, right? But the last thing is this, right? This deals with the PR as well. Does overpromising have an inherent harm? We don't think so, right? We think that actually overpromising might be a good thing because we don't want to conflict overpromising with actual beneficial policies, right? A lot of controversial policies that bring significant change. For example, getting higher taxes to give more welfare might sound like something that is really difficult to fulfill, but still possible at fulfilling, right? On our side, the politicians will actually take the risk. Police standards will actually take the risk of going to campaigns and not fear the repercussions. But your side, every police standards on your side will always fear impeachment, will always fear the cut of campaign funds. They'll never enter into policies that actually provide substantive benefits to people on your side, right? We don't think that they end up getting their benefits. That people will fear that punishment and oftentimes will only provide worse off policies.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Yellow. Can you please have the government whip?
There's a power struggle within the system right now in politics, where now it's candidate versus candidate as opposed to people versus candidate. What does this really mean? When people become the ones in power, that's when the candidate really then complies with the idea of by the people, for the people. How does this then really happen under side government? This is because when we ask these politicians or candidates to stay consistent with the principles and promises that they have promised the people, that's when people know who they are really voting for that represents them. Whether I am pro-abortion or pro-choice, whether I am pro-LGBT or not, it's the same damn thing. Hence, when it comes to Trump and how Trump got into power, he promised the people that will build a wall around Mexico so that less immigrants can come in. Theresa May told us that we will welcome immigrants, but then again, clamp down on them and will not allow any students who complete their degrees in the UK to find jobs in the UK. This is harmful because it doesn't only affect the politics and the people in it itself, it's the people's relationships with other people that are affected. Hence, when it comes to people or politicians and candidates making policies, what is the balance of probabilities and the skill that Amrit always uses? I'm using against her. As to where do they then make more measurable realities as we try to speak on? They want the reality, we're giving to them. First, we're talking about reducing populism as some populist ideas are then raised. So please answer the question as to how do we want politics to become in the future world? Populism is a very harmful idea. We see Macron changing his stances in the French elections so that more people will vote for him so they can defeat Marine Le Pen. What this means is that even if your side, liberal democracy wins or conservative democracy wins, we don't care. We want what the people want. The fact is that when they are pledging for things like this in the beginning and they're changing their stances all the time, people can never decide because there is no justification as to why they've changed it. There is lack of incentive for the justification to even come. So when they claim that controversial policies can never fly on our side, we say it'll be better for us to fly. Why? More intense justification for why these policies should be there. More intensive research on people done, of economic status, of family status, and all these sort of things. More people will be protected. Why? Because they understand now that the struggle of society has changed. People now base their identities upon how their politicians will then be and not based on liberal, left, or right. We believe that the changing of the binaries will be more incentive on our side. So when we say that true politics is when they manage to comply with the principles of for the people by the people, that's when it is. Our stance is that we don't care who wins. If people know who they're voting for to represent their ideas, identity, needs, status, and needs, is what the people want. Second, how important are set in stone stances to the voters for them? We say that the psychology of the voters, that they fall in love with the politician and it becomes an identity. Loyalty is a highly placed value, and this is why you can see when the impeachment attempt of Nixon is made these people nothing more. What they tell us, that binaries are worse on our side. But we don't tell you that binaries are worse on your side, and politicians cannot stray away and feel like this works better. So for example, if I'm a liberal person who is pro-abortion, but wants to run a conservative policy on economy, in their side, they can't do that. Why? Because so many people will oppose it. People will be more stuck into these bubbles of society. They'll never be able to understand and comply to these circumstances that this needs change. Why? Even if in time when we set a deadline to present these values or ideas in presidency, is that there's supreme cost to change it. There's so many checks and balances that becomes. More so, the deterrence of impeachment is more on the people now. The fact that people become the police and the deterrence for them is large. We increase the threshold, we increase the punishment for political suicide. This means that any politician who claims to then say this and does not do it means they are politicians who are lying and will never then support that politician anymore. Worse off, they say that the archaic idea of what is left and right will still be strengthened and more victims are caused on their side. What are the victims? People who believe in progressive tax but can never be done in a liberal democracy means that these people will always stay in the bubble where they are hard. Now they say that defending policies are bad, that defending all the things that said is good and must change with the times will then still be better to be adaptable. The problem is that the declaration of the pledge means that you started off like this, you have to end off like this. Why is the time frame of the campaign so important for them? Because even if times will change, people won't really recognize it on an instant. People base you based on the news that you are presented in. People vote for you based on the things that they see you do. People vote for you based on whether you supply them free water or not. If times change and suddenly water supply is low, then you say you don't supply free water, then people will obviously be mad and more backlash will happen on that scale. So we don't understand on their case when they say that defending policies is bad. We believe that it's great. More so, they said that overpromise leads to less likely happen due to deterrence. We believe that this impeachment and jail time due to increased policing on them, on voters, on the people, is much better. For that, yes.
The stock exchange tomorrow, if the shale oil prices in America falls down and Donald Trump is still committed in building a wall, in your world it will be justified because you won't enter jail and because you committed to the promise, it's a real what's necessary. Why is that a good thing?
True, but then again, if people were ready to see share prices falling down after he was put in power, there'll be more people to go against that idea because people would then notice. This is when they can understand that times have changed and this policy can never happen anyway. You ran with the promise to build the Mexico wall, just like you aren't able or incapable to do it right now because of the share prices that fell. Easy as that. Third, why is the implementation of this policy makes policies better? More transparent and cleaner elections. There's no sparing of campaigns. There's less room for error. Measure realities. As well as politicians really take in note into what they say, in account of what they do and how they present themselves to the public. There'll be more accountability of the candidates to perform what they promise and how they present themselves. It takes election more seriously and less distrust. This means more people will see election less people will see election as a game and more of something that affects their lives. Now people see it as a game and they're less likely to make and measure their promises or to measure their politicians' promises. Hence, eventually then really lives in a better world. We believe that it's us on-site government. Why? When we promise to see, when we want the politicians to make choices that we want, and we voted them for in, like to give welfare to the poor, to supply free waters to the people of the state, and how politicians cannot change their stances based on which state they go to, whether they're more liberal or conservative. We believe the politicians that we want are people who are consistent with their promises. Just like we make pinky promises when we're children, because we understand that these are very important things that we take in account of. Thank you.
The opposition whip, then he's a center portion.
Yeah.
Often, the best politics comes during the most urgent times. But in the government's bench, the capacity of the administration to address urgent needs will be held at ransom because you need to fulfill the promises that you make during your candidacy and during the campaign. Then if you don't do that, you would go to jail. Like this whole world with heaven and earth, I don't know which is heaven, which is hell, right? Because was Obamacare, was it heaven? I don't know whether breaking away from EU was a bad thing. In fact, the whole claim for about Francois Hollande, I think it was unsubstantiated. Right? When Nicolas Sarkozy left the administration, France was faced the highest unemployment it has ever seen throughout French history. The pension scheme was facing imminent threat. And it was Francois Hollande's immediate need to privatization that led the recovery of the country and not to follow the fate of countries like Portugal, Italy, and Greece. I don't know why that's a bad thing. Literally, an entire nation was able to recover because someone decided to prioritize urgent needs instead of bipartisan politics, right? But this policy was rather strange. If you look through your notes, there was no punishment or punitive measure for changing your policy. There was none. Because if someone changed your policy, there was no punishment. In fact, there was punishment whether or not you can fulfill your promise when you are in office. And we told you there are multiple layers or circumstances that will affect your capacity to serve your promise, right? And my POI was particularly important in this debate because when forced between a rock and a hard place, you need to make a tough choice. And in those circumstances, opposition will compel this individual to make bipartisan decision or decision that were previously designed because or else this person would enter the jail. And the point is, you can never predict the crash of the share or market or commodity prices. You can never predict. But it's harmful to have a president who's more likely going to fulfill or focus on bipartisan policy during times of leadership instead of times of candidacy, right? So I don't know. There are some vague words that are thrown around this debate that was left unsubstantiated. We will visit one by one. But the burden of opposition will be resolved by looking into three different issues. Number one, will flexibility harm candidate politics? We first told you there are urgent needs. There are time for you to run for politics and there's time for leadership. And normally I told you there are circumstances that require mechanisms that requires you to deviate from party politics, right? For example, like Francois Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy. But more importantly, there's sometimes you need to deviate in order to form strategic coalition. Like when the parliament was hung in Australia, like the coalition with the environmental friendly party was the reason why Julia Gillard came into power. This is not like their policy just takes into consideration when candidate A, candidate B. Our arguments were sensitive how governments were formed. Can you imagine losing the presidential race and also your Congress and also the Senate? Sometimes you need to make compromises in order to form strategic coalitions so that you can maintain a majority to lead your country. In your world, these things will be reduced to things that was run in a website. I think it's harmful, right? I think that world, like the obvious harm is that don't you want people to engage in presidential debate rather than to just go and check the update on the website? What did he say? What did he say? It literally does not substantiate people's moving position. Like people were just based on what was said in the website and was clearly unsubstantiated, was clearly not confronted with context and realities, and those things are supposed to matter. I think that's far worse in this circumstance. But the next issue in today's debate is flexibility and what kind of issues that you deal with. The inability to be flexible, and a world forces you to be rigid, forces you to be like only create policies that are menial. Then you will only engage with because it's so easy for you. Was that it's grand, and I'm supposed to accept that the word grand is an automatic harm. That the word grand somehow does not promise a better future for this individual. I'll address this in my point right now. I'll go.
Thanks. I think the biggest problem that was yet to be recognized is Donald Trump will win on promises, but then the people who promise the switches that he makes later on will lose in the election, like Jeb Bush, like Marco Rubio, who are promising things that he ran later.
Okay, I'll explain this weird argument of first movers advantage later. But I think that also in addition to why flexibility is an important thing, when you're forced to defend something that you committed to, I think you're more likely going to aggressively defend the thing because that's the only thing you can defend on. I think Trump is more likely going to justify people to support his policy, and it becomes far worse. And I'm sorry, guys, we knew about the fact that Donald Trump wanted to build a wall and separate U.S. and America and to prevent immigration from their neighboring country. We knew about it. I think you need to explain circumstances where the flip-flop was so damaging that allowed him the benefit, right? The next issue is extravagant promise a bad thing? And I think this is where the government bench really took today's debate. Because first of all, we told you that the premise of this argument is that the extravagant promises goes completely unchecked. I'm sorry, reality is that there's presidential debate where individuals are able to confront their position. Campaigning literally means that you're forced to justify the policies that you make. Just because something is extravagant doesn't automatically grant you a place in the office. Often you have to convince the individual on the ground. There are many processes that hold you accountable. But essentially, there was literally no argument why extravagance was a bad thing. Like grand policies are usually the most inclusive one and are usually justified to be the most necessary one. The Obamacare was an answer to the millions of individuals that did not have healthcare system that represented them. That extravagant policy meant that individual had a bed or a place to find to save themselves or to cushion themselves in times they were most vulnerable. The last question in today's debate is that which system is most likely going to be representative? And this big argument about loyalty, right? Sounds like a Kendrick Lamar song, right? But more importantly, their argument about loyalty does not explain why does loyalty immediately change the moment like I make some adjustments with my policy. In fact, in their policy, it becomes far much more damaging because idea A and idea B, the mere clash would deem as a big contradiction, and you would be deemed as an unworthy candidate, right? But in fact, I think loyalty is the reason why people are more likely going to adopt more aggressive methods in policy advocacy, and that is more harmful. The problem is in your debate, when individuals look at the website, they are forced with the binary. And they will stick with that binary until the end, and they will not compromise, right? Now, this argument about first mover's advantage, I literally think it is first mover disadvantage because someone else can literally copy you off. Because rich parties are in a better position to ensure and promise grand scheme of ideas because it's supported by the NRA. And I don't know how this poor individual will be able to promise good things when literally you be like, you're an independent candidate, how are you able to promise this kind of change? Ladies and gentlemen, politics is sometimes needs to address more important things. And sometimes we need to deviate with our pinky promise. If it meant to save the nation, we need to do the right thing and deviate from our policy, party emotion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Opposition Whip. Now, can I please have the Opposition reply speaker? Yeah.
You want mine?
The outside. What is it? The outside. Okay.
Yeah.
This debate will be adjudicated on which scenario and characterization is likely in this world today. Note that they haven't given us any reasons why politicians make extraordinary, extravagant, unrealistic policy. Because we gave you many reasons why that is untrue in nature. Because if you make an external policy, your opposition will seem more reasonable. If you make an external policy, no one is going to fund you. If you make an external policy, your voters won't believe you. So the more realistic explanation of what type of policies are probably grand, somewhat controversial, maybe not bipartisan policies that have the capacity to enact some change that they would not have made on side government because they have to definitely follow through their policy in any possible scenario. Operating on this premise, we must first then adjudicate what politicians are likely to do. According to them, there are only three scenarios. First of all, they say richer parties have the ability to shift better, and therefore we're always going to have poorer parties losing out. But let's actually adjudicate the truth in this. We think it's actually more likely that poorer parties have an advantage. Because when you shift and you're seen as more reasonable, or you shift to represent the needs of your people, you are seen as more receptive. But in the converse, in a world in which everyone is to stick to their stances, who sticks to their stances better? A richer, more established party that can always be more hardline than you, they can always fund better than you. The one thing that poorer parties have is their reasonableness. You take it away from them. So I really don't understand why poorer parties are harmed. Actually, we think they're benefited. But the second accusation about politicians was there'll be a lot of media shifting. And people are confused, they don't know what their politics stand for. Maybe they vote for a politician they didn't consent to. But I don't think it acknowledges the reality of the media. I'd rather the media constantly badger politicians for their controversy, for their contradictions, their adjudication of why they changed, what the nature of the changes were, like Theresa May. On a comparative, then media's decided to play on the defensiveness. When Fox News continuously tells you that Trump is the greatest, because he's going to build this wall, he's consistent. In your world, you give more ammunition for defensiveness that leads to worse off politics, because how are you supposed to engage with a person who's taken an extremely hardline stance from the beginning? So I'm not sure why media shifting is worse. I'm also unsure why poorer parties are better off in their world. But also, I like to note, I don't think you can forgive them for this, the policy changes in all three speakers. First, there was no punitive measure, then there was a freaking impeachment, then according to Alex, the Supreme Court decide. I really don't know how they're going to have individuals attempt to do this without sufficiently proving that they actually get the benefits they want to. Because if it's so harmful and people are being victims, they're literally being indoctrinated, how does an attempt fix all those grievances? How does an attempt to make individuals benefit from it? Thank you for this. But the second thing I'm talking about is this binary nature. Like, I want to be realistic. I started off my speech by saying this, that in a world in which politics on the end of the spectrum gain you more support, favors, and you'll get party backing, no one in the middle is going to ever win. Politicians will either leave or they're less likely to win. So I'm unsure why they get less binary politics, more engaging politics, or more equitable politics. But the second is about people, not in your notes. You will never see once did they explain why safe policies means meaningful policies. Because we say they are support policies, often they're just extensions or really unrelated consequences that people don't consent to, don't give a shit about. But extravagant policies doesn't equate to bad policies. Often that's the result of them having coalitions. In your world, literally politicians won't be allowed to enter coalitions because they promised to enter a coalition. As a result of that, they will lose the majority. On a trade-off, I'd rather be sensitive to the needs of some populace, be seen as somewhat contradictory, but be reflective of the needs of the population. In your world, because people are loyal, and the point at which politicians look at their populace in the eye and say, I can't represent you, because I have to stick to my campaign promises, their loyalty will go up the drain because no one cares. But first mover advantage, what kind of crap is that? Like, obviously that's true, like first mover advantage in both worlds, but in your world, it's already true. I don't think there's a response. They will start off as a first mover advantage and score and remain that really critical, really extreme version. Your first mover advantage damages individuals in your side. I really think at the end of this debate, it was just whether or not forcing individuals to stick with circumstances that they consented to in the beginning, but not towards the end, harms or benefits individuals. Because in your world, people who supported Bernie and Obama, who believe in the dream, won't even vote in your election because people don't know your candidates believe in them, and they sure as hell don't believe the candidates know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, opposition reply. Can we please have the government reply to end the debate? Here. Yeah.
Do not let side opposition run away with how people, under their paradigm, would just vote for extravagant policies. Just look at what Jeremy Corbyn is doing. His massive spending expenditure that he plans to do, if he becomes Prime Minister, would literally bankrupt the UK. And this isn't even a left-wing newspaper reporting that all his left-wing policies were excessive and will bankrupt the country. And what's happening right now is that more and more people are voting for him. So don't let them run away how people will just ignore extravagant policies, because people, as Mitchell told you, are attracted towards extravagant policies because it fits towards what they want. There are two reasons why that side loses this debate. Firstly, why their side distorts the landscape of politics in the country, and secondly, and this was largely unresponded to, why their side harms the democratic process, especially when people don't come out to vote because they see politicians as hypocritical snakes. But before moving that, here's some nitty-gritty things to talk about, because they like to conflate, right? I talked about we will publicize it and scrutinize them. Then Mitchell talked about impeachment whatsoever. Those kind of examples about impeachment were not like part of our model. They were just used as part of to explain an example, right? So don't let them run away with that. And this is a trade-off that we need to take. Be rather than transparency, rather than turning politics into a game of thrones where people are literally competing on who's more cunning. So let's look at the landscape of politics. And we talked a lot about accountability, right? The other side contested by saying, no, flexibility is far more important. But really, right, if politicians always enter into politics by thinking, maybe I'll have the flexibility to do that, that's far worse, right? If you look at how Brexit progressed, right, all the pro-Brexiters were literally like, oh no, we will get the best deal, not doing a proper cost-benefit analysis of the worst-case instance if no one will have a trade deal with them. This is exactly what's happening right now. Our side forces those kind of politicians to research more on that as opposed to hide behind the veil that, they are just being flexible later on. And this is as we told you, this is a trade-off we're willing to take for the sake of political integrity. We want that person to maintain the stance and continuously fight for the stance that they promise. So under your side, you have a politician. Let's say like you have politician A, for example. If he realizes that giving free healthcare is really hard, that politician will just opt out just because he thinks it's very hard, right? We don't think that's a good thing. We would rather that person continuously push forward to, and with all the cost-benefit analysis that we do more, our side is better. But the next issue that was contested was that our side said that they used to create more cleaner political campaigns. The other side said bipartisanship is better. But this ignores the rebuttal that Alex gave, that excessive bipartisanship is actually bad, right? And honestly, right, if there's excessive bipartisanship that occurs, politics becomes literally a politics of Game of Thrones, where people are literally competing on who's more cunning, who will get more people. Media will start smearing politicians even more for the most nitty-gritty kinds of things. And Alex also gave you a lot of things, right? Like they went unresponded. The blurring of lines is more likely on the scale to happen under their side, when politicians do not have an incentive to keep a promise and to just hide behind the veil of words that, I'm just trying to be flexible. That's far worse under their side. This is a trade-off we're willing to take, and this is why our side creates a more principally good landscape of politics. We rather people vote on that person's principles as opposed to the amount of campaigning that they do and the amount of flexibility that they claim they have. But the second thing is improving the democratic process. They kept saying a hard Trump is worse than a flip-flop Trump. That is true, but it ignores the argument that we gave you. More people will actually go out to vote. Those Bernie voters that did not go out to vote will obviously come out to vote because they know that he's pretty damn serious about building that wall, and they know that the alternative of Trump is far worse. So under our side, Trump would definitely lose because Bernie supporters will go out. And most importantly, we create a more inclusive democratic process where voter turnout should be higher because they recognize that these kind of politicians are not snakes, that they really mean what they want to do. Our side creates better politics.
Thank you very much to all speakers. You may cross floors, shake hands, enjoy your dinner.